Hey guys, Sharpend here. In this video we're going to recreate the synth from Galimatias' song Shy Dancer. The original sounds like this. And what we're going to be making today sounds like this. Okay, so I started this sound with a sine wave. It sounded like this. And I added some frequency modulation with a white noise. Because the original sound has this sort of like ring modulation tone to it, something like the synth is breaking off. I think part of it is probably because of the room acoustics. It was recorded using a phone, so I can't tell, but I decided to add it anyway just in case. And I'm filtering it a tiny bit, so I remove just a tad of the high end. And it also has this sort of steel drum quality to it, so I added a steel drum layer and the sampler. It's really quiet, but it adds just the necessary additional harmonics above the synth. And then there's the volume envelope, which has a tiny bit of attack so that it doesn't sound too clicky. So just 1 millisecond will do. A decay of 1.3 seconds and a release of 700 milliseconds, so that the notes slightly roll over into one another, and a very slow LFO that is modulating the fine-tuning by a bit. I'm trying to emulate analog synths that have a slight pitch drift. And it gets really interesting once you start adding effects. Here is the effects list that I've added, and it starts with Flutterbird. I'm basically adding a super fast vibrato at like 15 Hertz or so. It's very noticeable. You can hear that the sound has some movement and a very ring modulated-ish sound, so I'm trying to emulate that using the vibrato and Freak by Native Instruments. It does sort of like a ring modulation thing. It's mixed very low, like very low, again to add this sort of noise that it's missing. And then I'm adding some drive using the rev plate, just to bring out some extra harmonics. And I'm using a patcher to split the lows and the mids and highs. So we have the lows right here, nothing is being processed at the lows, but the highs are receiving some wave shaping. It's very subtle, some slight saturation. Again, just to accentuate some of the high frequencies, and I also hear that the high notes have more of a distorted ring sound to them, so this is how I'm trying to emulate that, by adding some saturation to only the high frequencies. And then this chorus dimension expander thing, just to add some depth to the sound. It makes a nice difference when you hear it with earphones. And then some small hole reverb. Again, the original thing was recorded with a phone, so I really couldn't tell how much reverb is being added, but I figured something at like 35% wet and at like 1.5 reverb time. It just gives some extra room for the notes to be in, and also it gives it a nice rollover between the notes. So even if the note stopped like right here, the reverb gives it some extra length. Let's hear without it and with it. And then what I did is I right-clicked my pattern and I just consolidated it. like this, and I got this track. And then in the video, Galimatias used a tape recorder to slow the tape down to get a different sound. So I emulated the exact same thing using Edison. I just clicked on the resample method and I pitch shifted it down 10 semitones, and it sounded like this. Now it's very important to pitch shift it down and not keep the same length of the loop, and that's why I'm using Edison, because if you do pitch shift it down but keep the same length of the loop using, for example, this method, the E3 generic, it would sound pretty lame. Like, it would be pitch shifted but the speed would remain the same, and the tape does both the speed change and the pitch change. So in order to recreate it, you just use the resample function. You get the longer loop as a result. And then I exported it into here, and I added some EQ that increases the low frequencies because they sound pretty bassy in the original track, and some compression to give it just a more a less dynamic feel and a more compressed, even feel throughout the loop. So let's hear it without them. And now the EQ and the compressor. And if you hear the original, you can also see that there's the room noise, and I can't tell if it's in the original track again because it's recorded on a phone. And there are also some artifacts. It feels sort of like it's been run for a vinyl emulation, which I don't have, so I can't recreate, but you can definitely hear how the noise with the frequency modulation and all of the ring modulation that we added plays an important part in making this really interesting. And also we used a fairly short reverb in the original sound, because once we time stretch it while pitch shifting, the reverb gets longer as well, so you get a more of a bigger whole feel. And that's pretty much it. For more content, make sure to follow me on Twitter and Instagram as well, and check out my playlists on the channel for other tutorials, track breakdowns, and my music as well.